Since When Am I Faust? Chapter 10, City Charade. It was nearing the end of the 12th hour of the night, and as it drew to a close, the soft glow of sunlight began to shine just beyond the horizon. One by one, the birds around Canterlot began to wake. Fluttering through the air, they chirped and sang, letting out a musical tune as they greeted the dawn with their song. It was around this time that the royal guards would switch shifts. While the sun began to rise into the sky, Celestia emerged from the shadows of the dawn. She ran in a hurry towards the castle gate. When she got close, her form came to a stop in front of Luna and Cadence. The two were waiting expectantly for their eldest alicorn, who was a little out of breath. Celestia breathed out.
Okay, that was too close, but I don't think Elaine saw me.
With a firm tone, the Lunar Princess suggested that they head out immediately, and Celestia quickly agreed. With a nod, the three princesses turned towards the gate and began walking. Tia's steps were slow and drawn out, and she struggled to stay awake. Over the past week, Celestia hadn't received a moment's rest. Upon returning to Canterlot Castle, the Solar Princess almost fainted when she saw the amount of paperwork waiting for her. A stack of papers covered her desk and dwarfed the size of Philomena's cage. Much to her dismay, she spent the last few days working through the paperwork. She had to work both day and night to get through it, and when she did, she celebrated with a victory cheer. Later during the day, she learned that there was a 3-week-long waiting list for day court, to which she screamed out in frustration. Luna didn't get a break either. Over the past few weeks, the residents of Canterlot were plagued with nightmares. Almost all of them were of the changeling swarm invading Canterlot, and the sheer number of ponies who experienced such nightmares had her running through the dream realm like a madmare. And as morning came, the Lunar Princess wanted nothing more than to rest. She was mentally exhausted, and she frequently yawned as she went about her day. With a curious glance, she walked over at the pink pony walking alongside her. With a curious glance, she looked over at the pink pony walking alongside her. Cadence was trotting along with a skip in her step and a smile on her face, humming a happy tune to herself. She was inspecting her camera, making sure that it was in perfect working order. She polished the lens and then double-checked to make sure that she had brought enough film with her. With all of her preparations complete, Cadence looked up towards the two sisters and asked,
So, who is Elaine?
The royal sisters, who were struggling to keep their eyes open, straightened up as they visibly shuddered. Just the mere mention of the pony's name was enough to raise the anxiety in their hearts. As the trio passed through a gate, a door could be heard slamming open in the distance. A moment later, the words,
Oh, there you are!
cut through the courtyard. Celestia and Luna stopped as a chill ran through them, and the fur on their back of their necks stood on end. With strained movements, Tia and Lulu slowly turned to look back at the castle. Their eyes widened in horror as the dreaded secretary pushed up her glasses, causing them to shimmer. Elaine opened her saddlebags and pulled out a quill and a checklist. Cadence smiled and waved at the pony, but the royal sisters looked at each other with worry. With a silent nod, Tia and Lulu turned to the waving pink pony. Grabbing her by the hoof, Celestia knelt and whispered into Cadence's ear,
Run! What?
That was all the dumbfounded princess could say before she suddenly found herself being pulled along by Tia. At seeing the trio suddenly run away, the secretary gave chase. She was desperate to hold them to the schedule that she had planned out. Following the three, Elaine ran into the city streets, waving her schedule back and forth as she called out to the princesses.
Wait, you'll be late for the first appointment!
She shouted, but the princesses didn't slow down. Instead, they seemingly sped up, and Elaine continued calling after them as her loud shouts echoed throughout the city streets. Unfortunately for the secretary, she was not built to run very far, and soon she lost sight of the princesses. As they disappeared from view, the secretary groaned as she looked down at her schedule. With a huff, she took out her quill and began trying to rearrange the appointments. A couple of minutes later, from the perspective of a narrow alley, Elaine's form quickly trotted past. Celestia and Luna huddled up against the wall and they held their breath. Luna also covered over Cadence's mouth in an attempt to keep her quiet. The tension they felt began to fade, and as they keenly listened, no sounds hinted to the secretary's return. Sighing, the two sisters felt a bit of stress lift off of their shoulders. Luna let go of Cadence's face, and the pink pony furiously wiped the debris of dirt from Luna's hoof off of her face. Grumbling a little bit, she looked at the other princesses and grumpily asked,
What was that all about?
Luna lowered her head slightly.
Sorry, Cadence, but if our plan's to work, we need to lose her. Had she caught up to us, she would likely give us work to complete while we were out.
The pink pony rolled her eyes as she held back a smile.
Oh, come on, Auntie Luna, it can't be that bad. No, it's worse.
Celestia said with a jolt, and Cadence looked up at the white mare. She then noticed that the alicorn had lines under her eyes, and they were bloodshot from a lack of sleep. Celestia shook her head, embarrassed by her sudden outburst. She stood back up and smiled softly at the pink pony as she gave a little yawn.
Elaine is a sweet pony and she's good at her job, but she's a little too zealous when it comes to clearing her schedules. I need a break.
Cadence nodded.
Okay, that makes sense,
she said, getting up and dusting herself off. Then she began to walk down the alleyway. Looking back at the other princesses, she laughed as they nodded off slightly.
Come on, let's go.
The two sisters lifted their heads and followed after the mare. Walking onto another roadway, the three of them began heading in the direction of the hospital. Some of the residents who had already woken up looked on in awe and confusion as they spotted the three princesses strolling through town. A nearby clock tower began to ring, and Luna looked up, nudging her sister. With an understanding glance, Celestia nodded and lit up her horn. Besides her, the lunar princess did the same, closing her eyes and feigning deep focus. The two sisters took the opportunity to rest their eyes. Up in the night sky, the moon was slowly enveloped in Luna's magic. It turned blue in hue and it began to drop down below the horizon. As the moon fell in the west and the east, the light of dawn gradually grew within a minute, and half of Equestria was under the full light of day. Afterwards, they continued on their way, but soon after the sun rose, their ears perked up as some pony yelled,
Look out!
The three princesses lifted their heads and looked around, but there was nothing. Then the trio suddenly caught a glimpse of a red-maned mare. She shot past and narrowly missed the tower. Tapping it on her way past, the pony threw her forelegs out and shouted,
Huh!
Then she sped off as she began laughing to herself about something. Celestia and Luna looked at each other with wide eyes, and with a stunned expression, Tia lifted her hoof and pointed at the sky, asking,
Was that Mother?
Luna breathed out with a grunt and nodded her head with a faint smile.
Yes, sister, I believe it was.
Looking up into the sky, Kaden scrunched her muzzle and silently pulled out her camera. She waited for a good shot, but then a stray thought caught her mind. She turned her head to look at the sisters and asked,
Didn't the doctor say that she needed to keep from flying so her wings could heal properly?
The two sisters visibly twitched at hearing her question, and they simultaneously snapped their heads up towards the flying mare.
Mom, get back here!
They shouted, and then they took off running after her. The regal mask that the ponies had come to know vanished, and they simply became two daughters chasing after their mischievous mother. Several residents getting things ready for the day exited their homes only to be confused at the sight of the two sisters running through the streets shouting at the sky. If that wasn't enough, a sudden flash of light caught the residents' attention. They looked over to the source only to find Princess Cadence fiddling with her camera. The pink mare clicked the flash button off and then looked up to see the other princesses had left her behind. Down the street, the two sisters unfolded their wings and prepared to take flight. As they took to the skies, Cadence's eyes widened as she stumbled with her luggage as she pulled her wings out from under her saddlebag. Running after the two, she called out,
Hey, wait for me!
It was the beginning of the first hour of the day and I found myself watching Lauren speed through the streets. The restless mare had been struggling to stay inside for the past few days and I had finally agreed to her pleas to get some fresh air. Now that she was out, the alicorn darted in between houses and narrow streets. Stretching her limbs out, she gave a cheerful smile and asked me,
So, what do you think, Alex? This is both awesome and terrifying,
came my immediate response. If there was some sort of seatbelt or safety bar, I'd be holding onto it for dear life, but a wide grin would undoubtedly be covering my face. She laughed as she detected the nervousness in my voice and nodded.
Make sure to take notes, kid, because your flying lessons aren't going to be easy. Really? You're going to teach me how to fly?
My excited voice echoed throughout her mind. The alicorn grinned at my enthusiasm.
Sure thing, but a fair warning, I'm a strict teacher. I don't care, I learned how to fly!
I mentally did a happy dance, and the alicorn rolled her eyes at my childish behavior. As we neared the middle of the city during our morning flight, the alicorn's eye began to twitch. Her vision became more strained, and a shared sense of alarm flowed between us.
Time limit?
I asked. Lauren gave an irritated grunt.
Yeah, it would seem so. Sorry, Alex, but I have to switch with you again.
With a disappointed sigh, I said,
So I take it our chances of them not knowing we snuck out are absolutely zero.
The alicorn deadpanned.
Yeah, I figured. We are so getting a 3-hour lecture when we get back, aren't we? Probably.
Lauren shrugged. With a sudden change in our plans, Faust steered us to the right and dropped down between two buildings. Upon landing, the soft clacking of our hooves against the cobblestone echoed throughout the corridor. Looking around with a cautious glance, Lauren checked to make sure that no one was around. Once we knew that we were alone, she lit her horn. The reddish-orange glow lit up the narrow street, and the brightness grew like a flame. A moment later, there was a soft magical poof, and the glow of our horn went with it.
What was that?
I asked. The alicorn shrugged.
Just a simple spell to make us look like a Pegasus.
She said this while walking towards a nearby window, showing me our reflection. I looked us over, and sure enough, our horn was gone. While looking into the glass, the alicorn's eyes began to twitch, and she gave a drowsy smile.
Well, it looks like I've reached my limit for a bit. Mind taking over? Sure thing,
I said, and then I shook my head in surprise as I realized that she'd already given me control. Lauren had been really straining herself to stay with it while we were in the air, but on a side note, she was able to retain control for several minutes longer, so that was a plus. Still surprised at my reflection, I reached up and felt the appendage on my head. I pulled my hoof down and looked at it.
Oh, that's so cool. Thanks.
I headed out, hoping to get back before our absence was discovered. Reaching the end of the alleyway, I had to stop and shield my eyes from the bright light. My eyes quickly readjusted, and as they did, I let out an inaudible gasp. Canterlot was a wonder in terms of architecture, and the fairy tale sights were captivating. Like a tourist, I walked along with a wide-eyed expression and a curious smile. This was my first time visiting the city, and it was every bit what I was hoping to see. Lauren had been complaining to me about being confined to the hospital room this whole time, yet now that we were out, I was probably enjoying it more than she was. I had been in Equestria for a little over a month, yet this was my first time truly seeing the world I now find myself in. It's nice to just sit back and look at the beautiful world that we live in. Sure, there are plenty of ups and downs and shitty people and things, but it's still beautiful in its own screwed up way. Anyways, let's get on to our gorgeous donators. Top donators are 630, Peter Coulthard, J Tinman, Darkside, Only One Thing, and Twinkie. Raiden, Narwhals, Black Moonheart, Pastel Skies, Austin Rollins, Crazy Killer 557, Stu Hex, Swordbreather and Mordred, Omicron Lyrae, Will, Chris, Dospo, Delta Omega, Jack Cadge, Ruinetithe 9852, Madman Sten, Leslie Prickett, Drake Lovedragon, Hunter Norman, Stephen Bingham, Linega 12, Sorcerer Constantine, Adzaza, Conver, and many more fantastic people. Thank you all so much for watching this video and live life to the fullest.